There is a lot you need to learn to get to 1000 ELO, and while tactics aren't everything, they do play a huge part. There are 8 basic tactics that you need to know how to recognise, and know how to exploit, and that is what we are looking at today. Learning these, understanding them, will help your rating go through the roof. Let's start with the humble pin. This is a very basic example. We will be stepping it up from here, but in this case, for a pin, it is where a lesser piece becomes pinned to a piece of higher value. Now, in this case, this is known as an absolute pin, where the lesser piece becomes pinned to the king. So, as you can see, the bishop can quite happily come across to the d4, pinning the horsey to the king. Now, the king is forced to move. He has no other legal moves apart from moving the king. Clearly, the horsey can't jump out of the way because you can't move into check. So the king moves, and we gobble up that horsey and go on to win the game. Happy days. So that last example was an absolute pin, where it was the piece of higher value being the king. For a relative pin, it is a piece of higher value which is trapped, which is anything other than the king. So in this case, it is the queen. So what we want to do is clearly to bring across the bishop to the c3, pinning these bad boys together. Now the queen would come down to here, and we can quite happily trade off the bishop for the rook. With the rook being worth 5 and this being worth 3, quick maths says that is better deal for us. Happy days. Alright, so here we have a game from 1965. We have Hampiuk in the white and the mighty Karpov in the black. And this example really shows the mighty power of pins. I'm going to encourage you to pause it and try and work it out yourself. There's a few moves involved here. This isn't just a one move show. But let's have a little look at the position. For white, we have the king backed into the corner, the queen desperately trying to defend, and the rook, which is just kind of there. We can kind of ignore these pieces over here since all of the action is over this side of the board. Now for black, what do we have going on? Well, we have the bishop staring down like so. We have the rook staring up and staring across, and we have the mighty queen in the corner staring down like this, where we can take advantage of this potential pin. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to find the most forcing move, and the most forcing move by far is coming across with the rook, putting the king into check. Now the queen cannot go ahead and take because the queen is pinned by our queen. The king is forced to move and comes to here onto the g1, but now the king is pinned by the bishop like so. So what can we do? We can quite happily come back with the rook, and we are now pinning the queen and the king together. Again, he can't take back like so because of the check there. So we are now just trading off our rook for a queen, and we are about to win the game. And I'll make this the final example of pins, but this is a pin which was actually missed in a game. It can be so easy to be trigger happy, see a move and just go for it. Again, have a little pause and try and work it out yourself. But in this example, white decided they saw this bishop was free, and they just came up and took it. And look at that analysis bar just drop right down there, because there's actually a mate in 2 here. Looking for pins, we can see this pawn is pinned to the king by this. We have the queen bearing down like this. That means the queen can actually jump up, put the king in check. Pawn can't take because of the pin. So the king only has one move, and that's to come across to here. And from there, we can just quite happily come across with the bishop. Now we can take, and that's checkmate. Just taking a little bit of time looking, what do I have pinned? How can I exploit that? Will massively improve your game. So with skewers, it's very similar to a pin. The only difference is instead of the higher rated piece being behind the other piece, in this case, it is the higher rated piece in front. So we can see in this example, bishop drops back, and now we are skewering the queen and the rook there. So the queen would move out the way, and now we can quite happily trade off our lower rated piece for their higher rated piece and go on to win the game. Now that was a relative skewer. For an absolute skewer, a bit like the pins, it would be the king involved. So in this example, again, bishop comes across, and now we are skewering the king and the queen. The king, in this case, being the higher rated piece, so king jumps out of the way, let's just say to here, and then happy days, we can go ahead and take the queen. Alright, so let's step it up a notch. It is white to move, and this is going to be a skewer in 2 moves. So, have a little pause, have a little think, and what best 2 moves are going to get us into this skewer and to completely win the game. Once again, going to assume you've done that. Well, the queen can quite happily come down, most forcing move, take the pawn, happy days, put the king in check, and yes, it looks like we're sacrificing the queen. However, we have this rook on the side, who can come up, get the skewer, the king is now skewered to the queen, king moves out of the way, and now we go ahead and get the queen. Not only did we win a pawn, we are also going into a completely winning endgame. Black only has the bishop and a couple of pawns, which aren't really doing too much. This pawn's going to get to the end, no problem. Completely winning endgame. Alright, so stepping it up one more time. This is going to be a 3-move pattern. So once again, have a little think. It is white to move. And I'm going to assume you've paused and done that. So the queen can quite happily come up to here, put the king into check. So the king drops down to here, to the e7 there. And the queen can come up once again, forcing moves, putting the king into check. Now, if the king was to just say, go ahead and take the horsey, queen now comes across to here on the f8 check. And now we have the king and the queen skewered. King moves out of the way, and then happy days, we have now completely won the game. But let's just say instead king comes back to here instead of taking. Well, we can come across, put him in check, king moves out of the way, and then from here we can just hop down the horsey, and then we have this lovely fork here. Oh, and also the queen attacking, yay. Hey, speaking of forks, let's talk about forks. So, a fork, it's where one of your pieces are attacking 2 of their pieces at the same time. So in this case, we can see horsey can jump up to the e7. We're now attacking the king, putting it in check, and also attacking the queen at the same time. King moves out the way, and happy days, we have just gone and won a queen. If we step it up a notch a little bit here, we have a little look at this position. How would we utilize that? Well, this is going to take an extra move. Again, pause it if you wish. Let's just put on the analysis bar so it's there. But we can see completely winning position for white. But why is that? Well, we can sacrifice the queen, put the king into check. King then is forced to go ahead and take the queen. Then with this horsey, we jump up, fork the king, fork the queen. King moves out of the way, and we have just completely decimated black's position there. Completely winning endgame for white. So the pawn fork, very similar to before, but our pawn is going to be attacking 2 pieces at the same time. So once again, very basic example, pawn can jump forward, and we are now attacking the bishop, we're attacking the horsey, and let's just say a horsey jumps out the way. Now our piece worth 1 is going to gobble up a piece worth 3. Happy days. Let's just say instead he goes ahead and takes, then clearly our rook's going to come up, and we are still in a completely winning position there. And one more quick example of the pawn fork. As you can see, once again, we can just push forwards the d5, and we are attacking both these guys at the same time. Bishop moves out of the way, we take the horsey, and we have come off better in that exchange. I'll keep this fairly quick. For a rook fork, it's going to be very similar, so the rook attacking 2 pieces at the same time. In this example, rook can come up, and once again, just attacking both pieces at the same time, puts the king in check, king moves out the way, and our rook goes ahead and takes. And for the bishop fork, as you can see in this position, clearly bishop can come across to the c5, attacking the king, attacking the rook there, the king moves out of the way, and then happy days. And the queen fork would look something like this. Queen coming to the e5, attacking both of these guys here. We're not currently attacking the horsey because clearly if we took it, just going to take back. But king moves out of the way, and then nom nom nom, we've got ourselves a rook. And just quickly showing you one in action here. I'll just quickly play through the moves, but again have a pause if you wish there. The queen coming across, putting the king into check. The king then moves back to the f7, but that is a huge mistake because now the queen can come and we are now forking like so. If the king was to just say move to here instead, then we would leave that and we would jump up to here because now we have the pin and we'd much rather go ahead and grab the queen. But let's just say instead, when we come across to here, he moves to something like, I don't know, let's go to the G7, then we'll just come down and we will go and grab that rook there. Alright, discovered attacks. This is an attack that's revealed once the piece moves out of the way of another. So, in this example, again, very basic example, but the horsey can jump up to here on the E5 there, putting the king in check, but now we have the discovered attack of the rook on the queen. So just say king moves out of the way like so, then the rook can come up and then grab that queen there. Slightly similar example, but this is discovered checks. When the piece moves out of the way, it reveals the check. Now, you can see from here the king would move out of the way, and then we go ahead and we grab the queen. Happy days. Oh, and now we have a fork straight afterwards. Amazing. Nom. Now, this is a fun example of a discovered attack. Now, as you can see, for the king doesn't really have anywhere to get away from. As you can see, our pawns are covering these squares, our king's covering this square, so really the only way for the king to escape is up this way on the G6. Now, we would love to be able to get our horsey to somewhere like here and then hop it to there, because that would be a checkmate. Then the king would have absolutely nowhere to escape from. So, swinging around the horsey like so, now threatening the mate in one, would be classed as a discovered attack. Clearly, the rook can't take our rook because, like I said, that is game over. So instead, what can the rook do, really? I mean, it could come up to here to try and stop us, you know, from jumping there, but then we're just going to grab the rook. Or he might want to just grab an extra piece there. That would now allow the king to escape if we came up. Now the king can escape across here. But let's be honest, we're just going to go and take his rook instead. And this is a mate in 3 using the power of the discovered check. So in this example, the queen can actually sacrifice herself. King comes down to take, but then, as we can see, we have the bishop coming across like so. Horsey jumping up, now we have what's known as a double check. The only move for the king is to drop back, and then the horsey can quite happily swing across to here, and that is a checkmate. And speaking of double checks before, let's move on to double checks. That is where we are checking the king with 2 pieces at the same time. So, basic example, horsey jumps up to here, we're now checking with the horsey, we're now checking with the rook. So that means that the king is forced to move, clearly can't take back because still in check. So the king moves out the way and we deliver the swift checkmate. Now, showing the power of it in action. So, as we can see here, if this queen gets down, white is going to be destroyed. But look at that analysis bar right at the top. White actually has a mate in 3. So, showing you the power of the double check. Well, first we need to get into that double check. So, sacrificing the queen. And why are we doing that? Well, the king only has one move, and that is to take the queen. But now we have this. Bishop comes across to here. We are now putting the king in check this way, the king in check this way, and doesn't matter which way the king moves, let's just say it comes to here, that is a checkmate. The double check is so unbelievably powerful, and just finding ways of getting into it, looking at what pieces you have and how you can best utilise them. Like I say, finding that queen sacrifice is going to be tricky, but once you know what you're looking for, realising that this is a check, it is so unbelievably powerful. And here we have an amazing example from a game from 1893. White's queen comes up and delivers the check, sacrificing herself. The bishop goes and takes, but then the pawn can take, turning into a queen. Once again, delivering the check. But now, the rook comes across and takes. But what's this? It's the discovered check and the double check. And it is just game over. Checkmate from here. Can't take back because of this. Can't do anything else. King can't move anywhere. Double checks are so powerful because they just limit everything that the king can do. Overloaded pieces. Now, an overloaded piece, I actually did a video on this yesterday, so if you want like a big deep dive on it, then by all means check out that video. But just as a quick example here, an overloaded piece is a piece that has more than one responsibility. In this case, this pawn, it is defending both of these two pieces here. How do we exploit that? Well, we have our bishop coming across like so, we have our rook coming up like so. So if we were to go ahead and take the horsey, the pawn is now no longer able to defend. If he was to go ahead and take, now we've won the horsey, and we've gone and won the bishop. If instead he decides he wants to keep a hold of the bishop and just say moves the king or something like that, then we run this bishop back. This pawn was just carrying a little bit too much weight. It was overloaded. So stepping it up a notch, have a little think, what is the overloaded piece here? Now, things might look like they're a little bit bad for white, but actually it's not too bad, you know? If this guy was to come down, then we're just going to gobble this up, and then, you know, the king's going to be absolutely fine there. But black has an overworked piece. Now, what is it? It's this queen. The queen is defending the bishop, but the queen is also defending this back rank from our queen getting back here and delivering that back rank mate. So what white can do is go ahead, take. Now, if the queen was to go ahead and then try and capture back, that's just going to be game over. You know, there we go, mate. If instead we come up and take, and like I say, if the rook came down, then we just jump out of the way, and black is still in this bad position here. Again, he still can't take because of this. So either way, we have either gone and won ourselves a bishop, or instead we will win ourselves the game. We identified that this queen was just working a little bit too hard and had more than one responsibility. Zwischenzug. May have said that wrong, but it's a German word essentially meaning an in-between move. Instead of making the expected move, we make a move in between. So looking at this position, this bishop has just come down and it has gobbled up our horsey. The expected move would be to just capture back with our rook, but now look at that analysis bar. It's just dropped down because this, then this, then this. Ruh-oh, not great. So what is a move that we could do in between instead of that expected move? Well, the horsey can swing around to d5. Now, you may not have got that straight away, but the reason why this is so deadly is because we are threatening this. Now, we can pick that up any time, but now if the queen was to come down for that a5 check, that is going to be absolutely brutal because we come across, we block with the bishop, we're now threatening the queen, he now can't take this because of this, and we are still threatening to jump up with a check, we're still threatening this. Things are a lot worse for white there. So instead, best move according to Lee Chess would be to bring the king down to the f2. And now we can just, yoink, go and grab that back, and things are so much better for black now. Alright, there's also something known as Zwischen-Check, it's also known as, which I'm going to call it as. Basically, that's an in-between check. So here, white comes down and captures this horsey here, and we've just seen analysis bar jump up in our favour. Now, white was expecting us to go ahead and capture back with our queen, and then something like, I don't know, the queen to the d2, and expecting us to trade off or something like that. However, there is an in-between check, and that would be jumping up the rook there, popping them in check. Now the king moves out the way, we grab this, and yes, we're just kind of trading off like so, but now we can jump up and grab it, and things are much, much more pleasant for us. Clearly, if the king just say jump back to here, then we have this. We are threatening all kinds of shenanigans. If the king came back to here, then we're going to bring the rook across instead. Whoopsie daisy. If the king just say comes to here, then we can just do something like the, I don't know, the bishop to the b5, and then offering to trade off like that. And now we have this pin going on here. But you can see just the power of that in-between check. Not doing the expected check, which was this. Just making that check in between there. And X-ray attacks. This is, as it sounds, looking through another piece. So for this rook is still attacking down this way, but currently it's looking through this rook here. Now, that might sound a bit confusing, but to make it make more sense, if the queen was to come up here and then put the king in check, yes, we're giving up the queen there, but this rook can now come across and then put the king in checkmate. As you can see, king has nowhere to run, and that's because this entire time he was looking through this piece. To give another example here, similar, but let's have a little look. Once again, the rook is looking through this piece, looking at trying to deliver the checkmate. Let's just get the analysis board on there. It's a mate in 2, very similar to before. The queen comes across, puts the king in check. Now the king can't take back because we have this bishop here. The rook's then forced to drop back, and then our rook, which was looking through the other one, can come across, deliver the mate. Once again, he can't take because of this. And just to give one more example here, this bishop is looking through. Let's just once again get that analysis bar back on. This is a mate in 2. Queen and the rook teaming up together like that, and the bishop along like so. So the queen can come across, put the king in check, king can't take because of this, so the bishop is forced to drop back. But from here, we can bring up the rook and deliver that checkmate. And there are the 8 tactics that you need to know to get better and to reach that 1000 rating. If you like this, leave it a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll catch you all later. Peace out.